A billionaire finds his lost son on a cold Christmas Eve. A boy he never knew existed. Years of wealth, success, and regret all collide in a single night as past mistakes, forgiveness, and a miracle unfold. This is the story of Chinedu Okafor and Emeka, a tale of love, redemption, and a Christmas neither of them will ever forget. Before we continue, please like this video and subscribe to this channel. Chinedu Okafor was a name known far beyond Africa. In business circles, his story was often told with admiration. A young man who had risen from modest beginnings to build a global empire. His companies stretched across continents, touching technology, real estate, energy, and finance. Newspapers called him a visionary. Investors called him unstoppable. To the world, Chinedu Okafor was the definition of success. But when the applause faded and the cameras turned away, Chinedu lived with a quiet emptiness that no amount of money could fill. His luxury apartment sat high above the city, glass walls revealing a breathtaking skyline of lights and movement. From this height, the world looked perfect, orderly, controlled, impressive. Yet inside the apartment, the silence was heavy. The rooms were spacious but cold, filled with expensive furniture that had never truly been lived in. Every object reflected wealth, yet nothing reflected joy. Chinedu often worked late, not because he needed to, but because work kept him from thinking. Thinking led him back to the past, back to the one decision that had shaped his life more than any business deal ever could. Years earlier, Chinedu had been a different man. Younger, hungrier, obsessed with proving himself to a world that once underestimated him. That was when he met Amara. Amara had been warmth in human form. She laughed easily, believed deeply, and loved without calculation. She believed in Chinedu long before anyone else did. When he doubted himself, she reminded him who he was becoming. When success seemed distant, she held his hands and told him it would come. Then one evening everything changed. Amara told him she was pregnant. To her the news was a blessing. To Chinedu, it felt like fear tightening around his chest. At the time, his career was just beginning to rise. Opportunities abroad were opening. Investors were watching. The future he had dreamed of finally felt within reach. Instead of seeing family, he saw responsibility. Instead of love, he saw limitation. Instead of staying, he chose to run. He told himself lies, that he would come back, that he would send money, that distance would make things easier. He convinced himself that success first, family later, was the logical choice. So he left. At first he sent money regularly. He avoided phone calls. He delayed visits. Each passing year made returning feel harder. Then one day, Amara stopped responding. No calls. No messages. Nothing. Chinedu told himself she had moved on. That she was fine. That the past was best left buried. But the truth had never left him. Now, decades later on Christmas Eve, Chinedu sat alone in his dimly lit living room. Outside, snow drifted gently from the sky, covering the city in quiet beauty. The streets below glowed with festive lights. Laughter echoed faintly from distant apartments where families gathered, sharing meals and memories. Chinedu sat with a glass of untouched drink in his hand, staring at a framed photograph on the table beside him. It was old and slightly faded. In it he stood beside Amara. They were younger then, smiling without worry, unaware of how fragile happiness could be. Her eyes sparkled with hope. His arm rested comfortably around her shoulders. For a long time, Chinedu simply stared. "I'm sorry," he whispered into the empty room. The words felt small compared to the years of absence, the unanswered questions, the life he had walked away from. His chest tightened as a familiar ache settled in, the kind that money could never silence. That night, something inside him shifted. For the first time in years, Chinedu felt an overwhelming urge to step outside his carefully controlled world. He stood up slowly, grabbed a simple coat, and ignored the call from his driver waiting downstairs. He wanted to walk. He wanted to feel the cold. He wanted to be among people, not as a billionaire but as a man. As he stepped into the city streets, the Christmas air bit against his skin. Carols drifted from nearby shops. Couples held hands. Children laughed. Everywhere he looked there was warmth, connection, belonging. And for the first time in a long while, Chinedu Okafor felt the full weight of what he had lost. Unbeknownst to him, this quiet walk on Christmas Eve was about to change his life forever. Because somewhere in the same city, a young man carried his blood, his name, and a story that would finally force Chinedu to confront the past he had tried so hard to forget. The cold that night was sharp and unforgiving. Christmas lights shimmered above the streets, reflecting off wet pavement and freshly fallen snow, but the beauty did little to soften the chill in the air. Chinedu walked slowly, hands tucked into his coat pockets, blending into the crowd of strangers moving with purpose. Some rushing home to family, others laughing as they stepped out of warm restaurants. Then he saw him. The young man sat on the edge of the sidewalk near a quiet street corner, slightly hunched, as if trying to make himself smaller. A thin jacket clung to his frame, clearly no match for the cold. His shoes were worn, their soles beginning to peel away. In his hands, he held a small piece of cardboard with carefully written words. "Just need food. God bless." Chinedu stopped walking. He didn't know why at first. He had passed many people like this before, faces blurred together by distance and routine. But something about this young man held him in place. Perhaps it was the stillness, or the dignity with which he sat, not shouting, not begging loudly, just waiting. When the young man looked up, their eyes met. Chinedu felt a strange tightening in his chest. The boy's face was lean, his eyes tired but alert. There was something familiar in the shape of his nose, in the way his brows furrowed slightly as he studied Chinedu's face. It unsettled him in a way he couldn't explain. "You're freezing," Chinedu said gently, breaking the silence. The young man nodded, surprised someone had stopped. "I'll be okay, sir. Have you eaten today?" The boy hesitated, then shook his head. "Not yet." Without another word, Chinedu gestured toward a small cafe nearby, its windows glowing warmly against the night. "Come. Let's get you something hot." Inside, the cafe was quiet, filled with the smell of coffee and baked bread. Chinedu ordered more food than necessary. Soup, bread, a full meal, and watched as the young man ate slowly, carefully, as if afraid the food might disappear if he rushed. "My name is Chinedu," he said at last. The boy looked up. "I'm Emeka." They sat in silence for a while, the kind that wasn't uncomfortable, just thoughtful. Outside, snow continued to fall, softening the world beyond the glass. "Do you have family?" Chinedu asked gently. Emeka paused, his spoon hovering over the bowl. "I had my mother," he said quietly. "She passed away last year." "I'm sorry," Chinedu said, and he meant it more than he usually did when those words passed his lips. "She worked hard," Emeka continued. "Did everything she could to give me a good life. But when she got sick, things fell apart." Chinedu listened, something heavy settling in his chest. "My mother used to talk about my father sometimes," Emeka said, his voice soft, almost distant. "She said he wasn't a bad man." Chinedu felt his fingers tighten around his cup. "She said he was just afraid," Emeka went on. "Afraid of responsibility. Afraid of staying." The words landed like quiet blows. "She never taught me to hate him," Emeka added. "She believed people can change." Chinedu swallowed hard. His heart began to pound, not fast but heavy, as if each beat carried weight. Carefully, as though stepping into dangerous territory, he asked, "Did she ever tell you his name?" Emeka nodded. "Yes." For a moment, Chinedu wished he hadn't asked. "His name was Chinedu," Emeka said. The room seemed to fade. The sounds of the cafe, the clinking cups, the hum of conversation, the soft music, fell away. Chinedu stared at the young man across from him, his vision blurring slightly. Coincidence, he told himself. Just a name. But deep down he already knew. Emeka continued, unaware of the storm building across the table. "She said he left to chase his dreams." She said he would have been proud of me. Chinedu felt a tightness in his throat he couldn't swallow away. The resemblance he had noticed earlier now felt impossible to ignore. The eyes, the quiet strength, the familiar sadness. Across from him sat not just a stranger, but a living reminder of the life he had abandoned. And on that cold Christmas Eve, in a small cafe filled with warmth, Chinedu Okafor realized that fate had finally caught up with him. The truth was no longer distant. It was sitting right in front of him. The cafe felt smaller now, as if the walls had quietly drawn closer. Outside, the snow continued to fall, soft and steady, blanketing the world in white. Inside, time seemed to pause. Chinedu sat across from Emeka, his heart pounding so loudly he was certain the young man could hear it. His hands trembled as he reached into the inner pocket of his coat. For years, he had carried the photo without knowing why. Now he understood. Slowly, carefully, he placed the picture on the table between them. Emeka leaned forward, curiosity turning to recognition in an instant. His breath caught. His fingers hovered above the photograph as if he were afraid to touch it. That's my mother," Emeka whispered. Tears welled in his eyes, not sudden or dramatic, but quiet and heavy, the kind that carried years of memories. "She kept this picture," he continued. "She used to look at it when she thought I wasn't watching." Chinedu closed his eyes briefly, pain tightening his chest. The image of Amara, her smile frozen in time, felt sharper now, more alive than ever. "I should have been there," Chinedu said, his voice shaking. "I should have stayed." Emeka looked at him, confusion and emotion mixing in his gaze. "Why didn't you?" he asked, not accusing, just searching. Chinedu swallowed hard. "Because I was afraid. Afraid of failing. Afraid of losing everything I worked for. I told myself I would come back. I never did." Silence stretched between them. Then, with a trembling breath, Chinedu lifted his eyes to Emeka's face. "There's something you need to know," he said quietly. Emeka nodded, bracing himself. "I am your father." The words fell gently, yet they carried the weight of decades. Emeka froze. For a long moment he didn't move. He didn't speak. He simply stared at Chinedu, as if trying to reconcile the man before him with the ghost he had grown up imagining. His chest rose and fell unevenly as memories flooded in. His mother's stories, her tired smiles, the unanswered questions he had buried deep inside. Finally he spoke. "I always wondered," he said softly. "I used to look at other fathers and sons and ask myself who I took after." Chinedu's eyes filled with tears. "You look like her," he said. "But you carry my eyes." Emeka let out a slow breath, the kind that came from deep within. Years of pain, confusion, and longing surfaced all at once. Yet surprisingly, anger did not come first. Instead, there was understanding. "My mother never hated you," Emeka said after a long pause. "She said holding on to bitterness would only poison her heart. She believed you would regret leaving." Chinedu nodded, tears finally spilling over. "She was right," he whispered. "I regret it every day." Emeka reached for the photo and held it close. "She forgave you long ago," he said gently. "Even before you asked." The weight in the room shifted. The silence that followed was no longer heavy. It was healing. In that small cafe, on a quiet Christmas Eve, the truth had finally found its voice. Two lives, once separated by fear and distance, now sat face to face, bound by blood, memory, and a fragile hope for something new. And though the past could never be changed, the future, at last, had a chance to begin. That Christmas Eve, Chinedu did something he had not done in years. He opened his home to another human being. The drive back to his apartment was quiet. Snowflakes drifted lazily past the windows as the city lights reflected against the glass. Emeka sat beside him in silence, unsure of what to expect, his hands folded tightly in his lap. Chinedu glanced at him occasionally, still struggling to believe that the young man sitting beside him was his son. When they arrived, Emeka hesitated at the entrance, eyes widening as he took in the space around him. The apartment was warm, softly lit, and decorated with simple Christmas touches. Nothing extravagant, just enough to acknowledge the season. "You can stay here tonight," Chinedu said gently. "If you want." Emeka nodded slowly. "Thank you." That night they shared a simple meal. Not rushed, not forced. They spoke carefully at first, choosing words as if learning a new language together. Chinedu asked about Emeka's childhood. Emeka spoke of small joys and heavy struggles, of his mother's strength, of nights spent studying by candlelight when electricity failed. Chinedu listened, each story filling a space inside him that had long been empty. For the first time in many years, he went to bed knowing he was not alone in the world. Christmas morning arrived quietly. The city outside lay still beneath a blanket of snow. Sunlight filtered through the windows, soft and pale. Chinedu woke early and stood for a moment outside Emeka's room, listening to the steady rhythm of his breathing. It was a sound he had missed without ever knowing it, a reminder of life continuing. After breakfast, Chinedu suggested they go somewhere. "I want to show you something," he said. They drove to the cemetery in silence. The cold air was sharp, biting at their skin as they stepped out of the car. Snow crunched beneath their feet as they walked between rows of headstones. Chinedu stopped before a simple grave. Amara Okafor. The name felt heavy and sacred. Emeka stood quietly as Chinedu knelt, his expensive coat soaking into the snow. He placed his gloved hand against the cold stone, his shoulders shaking as years of regret finally broke free. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I should have been braver. I should have stayed." His voice cracked. "I found our son." The wind carried his words into the quiet morning. "I promise I won't run anymore," he continued. "I will honor you by being the father I should have been." Emeka stepped forward, resting a hand on Chinedu's shoulder. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. In that moment, grief and forgiveness intertwined. They stood together for a long time, father and son, united by loss but anchored by hope. The pain of the past did not disappear, but it softened, making room for something new. As they walked back toward the car, Emeka broke the silence. "She would have been happy," he said softly. Chinedu nodded, tears glistening in his eyes. "I hope so." That Christmas morning marked more than a reunion. It marked the beginning of healing. A billionaire who had once measured life in numbers and deals now understood its true value. And for the first time, Chinedu Okafor felt the presence of peace. Fragile, imperfect, but real. Time moved forward quietly, as it always does. But nothing in Chinedu Okafor's life remained the same. In the months that followed that unforgettable Christmas, Chinedu began to rebuild. Not an empire, but a relationship. Emeka returned to school, carrying with him not just textbooks and notebooks, but a renewed sense of purpose. He no longer studied simply to survive. He studied knowing someone believed in him, someone was finally watching. Chinedu attended meetings with teachers, listened to Emeka's worries about exams, and celebrated small victories he once would have overlooked. He learned patience, something no boardroom had ever taught him. He learned how to listen without trying to fix everything with money. First it was awkward. There were moments of silence, moments of uncertainty. Years of absence could not be erased overnight. But Chinedu stayed. When Emeka struggled, he stayed. When emotions surfaced, he stayed. For the first time in his life, Chinedu chose presence over escape. Slowly, trust grew. The wealth that once defined Chinedu now took on a different meaning. He still gave generously, but with intention. He supported education programs, provided shelter for families in need, and quietly funded scholarships for young people who reminded him of the son he almost lost. This time he didn't give to impress the world. He gave to heal it. Emeka watched his father change, not through speeches or promises, but through consistency. Through simple things. Shared meals, long conversations, laughter over mistakes, and evenings spent together instead of in separate worlds. A year passed. Christmas Eve returned, gentle and familiar. The apartment was warm, filled with soft music and the smell of home-cooked food. Snow fell outside just as it had the year before. Emeka stood by the window, looking out at the glowing city below. "Funny how life brought us together on this day," Emeka said with a small smile. Chinedu stood beside him, his reflection visible in the glass. "Some miracles wait for the right moment," he replied. They exchanged a quiet glance. No words needed. The past was no longer a weight dragging them down, but a reminder of how far they had come. That night, as laughter filled the room and peace settled gently into his heart, Chinedu Okafor understood something profound. For all the wealth he had gathered, all the success he had achieved, true richness had only found him when he learned how to love, how to stay, and how to begin again. And for the first time in his life, Chinedu Okafor felt truly rich. If you enjoyed this story, please like this video. Subscribe to this channel so you won't miss our next interesting story filled with love, lessons, and unforgettable moments. Until our next story.